I realized I'd become a target the moment he walked into the office. That look in his eyes of someone who believes they can't fail. 15 years I'd been the invisible shield protecting this empire from legal catastrophe, preventing 12 major lawsuits that could have buried us. But to him, I was just dead weight holding back his grand vision. He didn't know that with one wrong decision, everything would crumble. And this time, I wouldn't be there to save him. My name is Clara Weston, and for 15 years, I've been the person nobody at Harrington Global Corp wanted to think about. Until they desperately needed me. As head of legal compliance, I was the invisible force field between this multi-billion-dollar financial corporation and complete annihilation. 12 major lawsuits, each one capable of bringing down our entire operation. And I'd neutralize them all before they could even make headlines. The morning everything changed started like any other. I arrived at our new Oxford headquarters at 6:45 a.m. An hour before most employees, coffee in hand, reviewing overnight updates from our Asian markets. My corner office on the 42nd floor had a view of the city that still made me pause sometimes. A reminder of how far I'd climbed from being a junior associate sleeping under my desk. I'd built something here, not just a career, but a reputation as the person who could navigate any legal storm. The board trusted me implicitly. CEO James Harrington himself had once called me the most valuable employee nobody knows about during a shareholders' meeting. That anonymity suited me fine. I preferred working in the shadows, preventing disasters rather than managing them. But that morning, I noticed something different. The executive assistants were whispering more than usual. There was a nervous energy crackling through the hallways. Then I saw him, Ethan Harrington, standing in what would soon be his new office, directing movers like a general commanding troops. I'd heard he was coming back from his MBA program in Europe, some prestigious business school where they apparently taught you that experience was outdated and disruption was the only path forward. At 32, he carried himself with the kind of confidence that only comes from never having faced real consequences. Tall, impeccably dressed. With his father's sharp features but none of the wisdom earned from building something from nothing. Our first interaction came during the Monday morning executive briefing. I was presenting the quarterly legal risk assessment, a document that had saved the company millions by identifying potential threats months in advance. Halfway through my presentation, Ethan interrupted. Ms. Weston, with all due respect, don't you think this level of caution is exactly what's preventing us from achieving exponential growth? The room went silent. Even his father looked surprised. Mr. Harrington, I replied, keeping my voice steady. This caution is what's kept us from becoming another cautionary tale in the Wall Street Journal. The regulations we navigate aren't suggestions. They're legal requirements with criminal penalties attached. He smiled. That particular smile of someone who thinks they're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Perhaps it's time we brought in fresh perspectives on risk management. The legal landscape is evolving, and we need to evolve with it. Fresh perspectives, evolution. The buzzwords of someone who'd never had to sit across from federal prosecutors or face down a class action lawsuit that could destroy thousands of jobs. But I saw his father nod slightly, and I knew the wind was shifting. Over the next few weeks, Ethan embedded himself in every department, asking questions that sounded insightful but revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of how a corporation this size actually functioned. He treated legal compliance like an IT system you could simply upgrade, not understanding that our procedures were written in the blood of companies that had fallen before us. The day he was officially announced as Executive Vice President of Strategic Development, I updated my resume for the first time in a decade. Not because I planned to leave, but because I'd learned to recognize the signs of a coming storm. And Ethan Harrington wasn't just a storm, he was a hurricane convinced it was a refreshing breeze. The seeds of conflict were planted in every meeting room where Ethan and I crossed paths. He had this way of framing every protective measure as an obstacle, every safeguard as fear. To him, I wasn't protecting the company, I was suffocating it. Clara, we need to talk about the Morrison acquisition, he said. cornering me after a board meeting 3 weeks into his tenure. The Morrison deal was a potential $500 million purchase of a fintech startup that had revolutionary payment processing technology and a labyrinth of regulatory concerns. "I've already submitted my assessment," I replied, knowing where this was heading. "There are 17 compliance issues that need resolution before we can proceed. The EU data protection alone." 17? He laughed, actually laughed. "Our competitors would have closed this deal yesterday. While you're counting problems, they're counting profits." "Our competitors are also under federal investigation," I countered. "Brennan Corp just got hit with a $200 million fine for the exact same GDPR violations I flagged in the Morrison report." He leaned against the wall, studying me like I was a particularly frustrating puzzle. "You know what your problem is, Clara. You're playing not to lose instead of playing to win. This isn't 2010 anymore. The regulatory landscape has loosened. The administration is pro-business now. The law hasn't changed, Mr. Harrington, and neither have the penalties. Please, call me Ethan. We're colleagues now." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've been reviewing your department's budget, $42 million annually for compliance. Do you know what our ROI is on that?" "Infinity," I said without hesitation, "because the return on avoiding catastrophic lawsuits is incalculable." He pushed off from the wall, straightening his designer suit. "Or zero, depending on how you look at it. We're paying for disasters that never happen. They never happen because we prevent them. Or maybe they were never going to happen at all." This was the fundamental disconnect. Ethan saw my department as insurance for imaginary fires, not understanding that we were the ones keeping matches away from gasoline. Every week brought a new challenge to our protocols. He wanted to fast-track international expansions without proper regulatory approval. He pushed for aggressive data monetization strategies that danced on the edge of privacy laws. He even suggested we could streamline our anti-money laundering procedures because they were unnecessarily complex. The breaking point came during a presentation about our new cryptocurrency investment arm. Ethan had assembled a team of young hotshots, all sharp suits and sharper PowerPoints, selling a vision of Harrington Global as a pioneer in digital finance. The problem was, their entire strategy was built on exploiting regulatory gray areas that weren't gray at all. They were clearly black if you actually read the statutes. "This is illegal," I stated flatly after reviewing their proposal. "Not borderline, not questionable, explicitly illegal under the Securities Act." "That's your interpretation," Ethan said smoothly. "Our external consultants disagree. Your external consultants aren't the ones who'll face criminal charges when the SEC comes knocking. God, Clara, do you ever get tired of being the wet blanket?" This from Ryan Cole, Ethan's longtime friend who'd mysteriously appeared as a strategic advisor despite having no relevant experience beyond managing his family's restaurant chain. "Every company in this space is doing exactly what we're proposing. Every company in this space is one investigation away from federal indictment," I shot back. Ethan stood up, his patience finally fraying. "Maybe the problem isn't the strategy, Clara. Maybe it's that our legal department is stuck in the past, too paralyzed by fear to recognize opportunity." The room was full of his people, all nodding along, all seeing me as the dinosaur standing in the way of their meteoric rise. I looked around, noting who was present and who was conspicuously absent. James Harrington hadn't attended. Neither had any of the senior board members who'd been with the company for more than 5 years. "I've kept this company out of court for 15 years, I said quietly. "I've saved us from bankruptcy 12 times over. But if you want to gamble everything on the assumption that regulations don't apply to you, that's your choice. Just remember, ignorance of the law isn't a defense, it's just ignorance." I left the meeting knowing my days were numbered. Ethan wasn't just challenging my authority, he was building a case against my entire existence at Harrington Global. Every protection I'd put in place was being reframed as paranoia. Every disaster I'd prevented was being dismissed as exaggeration. The next morning, I started backing up my files. Not the company's files, those belonged to them, but my personal notes, my correspondence, the paper trail that showed every warning I'd given and every risk I'd flagged. Because I knew something Ethan didn't. When you tear down the walls that protect you, eventually, the storm gets in, and I wouldn't be there to stop it. It was 5:47 p.m. on a Thursday when my world shifted. The office was emptying out, that quiet lull when the ambitious had already left for drinks and the workaholics were settling in for the long haul. I was reviewing a contract for our Singapore expansion when Ethan walked into my office without knocking, a small violation that somehow felt like a declaration of war. He closed the door behind him with deliberate care, and I knew, you don't work in corporate America for 15 years without developing an instinct for executions. Clara, he began, sitting down uninvited. His posture relaxed like we were about to discuss weekend plans. I want to thank you for your years of service to Harrington Global. Years of service. Past tense, I set down my pen and gave him my full attention, keeping my face neutral. As you know, we're entering a new phase of growth, he continued, his hands folded like a priest about to deliver last rites. And with that comes the need for organizational restructuring. We need to align our leadership with our forward-looking strategy. You're firing me. I didn't phrase it as a question. His mask slipped for just a second. He'd expected tears, perhaps, or angry denial. Not this calm acknowledgement. We're eliminating redundancies in senior management, he corrected, pulling out an envelope from his jacket. Your severance package is generous. 6 months' salary, continued health benefits through the year, and of course, a glowing recommendation. Redundancies, I repeated, tasting the word. Who's taking over legal compliance? We're bringing in fresh perspective. Ryan will be overseeing the transition while we search for someone who better aligns with our new vision. Ryan Cole, the restaurant chain heir who thought a cease and desist was a type of foreign cuisine. I almost laughed. Ryan doesn't have a law degree, I pointed out. He doesn't have any legal experience whatsoever. He has vision, Ethan countered. And he understands that in today's business environment, agility trumps caution. I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the city lights beginning to flicker on. 15 years of watching this view, of protecting this company from threats they never even knew existed. The Henderson lawsuit, I said quietly. Do you know why it never happened? What? 3 years ago, a senior manager named Henderson was building a sexual harassment case that would have destroyed us. Not just financially, reputationally. I found out before he filed, discovered he was falsifying evidence, and managed to discourage him. Quietly, no scandal, no headlines, no 8-figure settlement. I turned to face him. The Brennan acquisition that fell through, I killed it, found out they were cooking their books 3 days before we signed. The FBI raided them a month later. Clara? The data breach in 2019 that never made the news, I contained it, managed the notifications, kept it under the regulatory radar while we fixed the vulnerability. Do you have any idea what that would have cost us in GDPR fines alone? That's all in the past, Ethan said, standing up. We appreciate your contributions, but your approach is holding us back. Your excessive caution, your obsession with worst-case scenarios. It's creating a culture of fear instead of innovation. I walked to my desk, began placing personal items into my laptop bag. A photo from the company retreat 5 years ago. My father's fountain pen. The small cactus my assistant had given me as a joke about being prickly. You're making a mistake, I said, my voice steady as winter ice. Is that a threat? His tone sharpened. No, Ethan, it's a fact. I picked up the envelope, didn't bother opening it. You've just removed the only person who knows where all the bodies are buried. The only person who's been preventing this company from stepping on legal landmines for over a decade. We'll manage, he said. But something flickered in his eyes. Doubt? Or just annoyance? I pulled my keycard from my lanyard, set it on the desk with a small click. When the Singapore contract goes through, make sure Ryan checks the arbitration clause on page 47. The way it's currently written, we're agreeing to Chinese jurisdiction for any disputes. His face went slightly pale. What? Also, the Morrison acquisition you're so eager about, They're under investigation by the Justice Department for sanctions violations. It hasn't been announced yet, but it will be next week, probably. I shouldered my bag, walked past him toward the door. Wait, he said. If you know about these issues, I've been handling them. I cut him off. Every day, every hour. I've been handling problems you don't even know exist. But that's not your concern anymore, is it? After all, I'm redundant. I paused at the door, turned back one last time. You wanted me gone because you think I've been holding you back. But Ethan, I wasn't holding you back. I was holding you up. I walked out, leaving him standing in what was no longer my office, surrounded by 15 years of invisible protection he'd just stripped away. Security escorted me out, standard procedure, though the guard looked apologetic. As the elevator descended, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Let them learn the hard way what happens when you mistake a shield for a chain. 3 days. That's how long it took for the first cracks to appear. I was sitting in my home office, reviewing job offers that had started flooding in the moment news of my departure leaked. When my phone buzzed, Sarah Martinez, a junior lawyer I'd mentored, texting from her personal phone. Clara, Ryan just approved the Singapore contract without changes. The arbitration clause is still there. Should I say something? I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "That's not your responsibility anymore. Follow your new supervisor's direction." But, Clara, this could. I turned off my phone. By day 5, the calls started. First, from Tom Richards, head of international operations, trying to sound casual. Hey, Clara, quick question about that Morrison acquisition timeline. Ethan seems to think we can close by month's end, but weren't there some regulatory issues? I'm no longer with Harrington Global. Tom, you should direct your questions to Ryan. Ryan doesn't. Clara, he doesn't understand what I'm asking. Then I suggest you put your concerns in writing. For the record, the pause on his end was heavy with understanding. You knew this would happen. Have a good day, Tom. By week 2, I was watching it unfold like a slow-motion car crash. A contact at the Financial Times mentioned they were investigating Harrington Global's new cryptocurrency division. Someone had tipped them off about potential securities violations. The Singapore partners were raising hell about the arbitration clause, threatening to walk if it wasn't amended. But changing it now would require admitting the mistake to the board. Then came the Morrison bombshell. The Justice Department's investigation went public on a Tuesday morning, complete with FBI raids on Morrison's offices. Every news outlet ran the story. Harrington Global was named as the primary acquisition partner, with speculation about what they knew and when they knew it. My phone rang. James Harrington himself. Clara, I need to. I declined the call. He tried again. This time I let it go to voicemail. Clara, this is James. I've just learned about your departure. This is unexpected. Please call me back. We need to discuss some urgent matters regarding the Morrison situation. I deleted it. Wednesday brought something delicious. A leaked internal email from Ryan to Ethan, which somehow found its way to a legal blog I followed. I don't understand what Clara's notes mean. There are 47 different risk assessments for Morrison alone. Half of them are in legal terminology I need to Google. Can we bring in an outside consultant? The response from Ethan was even better. Handle it. We can't admit we need help this soon. By Thursday, I heard from Angela Foster, my former second-in-command who'd been passed over for my position in favor of Ryan. Clara, it's chaos here. Ryan just told the legal team to stop overthinking the Morrison crisis. He thinks we can just issue a statement saying we didn't know. He doesn't understand that we did know. Your reports documented everything. Angela, I appreciate the call, but there's more. That contract you were drafting for the European expansion, the one with the strict data protection provisions, Ryan scrapped it, said it was too conservative. He's using a template he found online. A template, Clara. For a $1 billion deal involving personal data from 12 countries. I closed my eyes. The European regulators would eat them alive. The fines would be astronomical. Document everything, I told her quietly. every decision, every override, every ignored warning, and start looking for another job. Clara, is it wrong that part of me wants to watch them burn? It's human, I replied. Just make sure you're not standing too close to the fire. Friday afternoon, the news broke that I'd been waiting for. A class action lawsuit had been filed against Harrington Global. Not about Morrison, that would come later. This was about the cryptocurrency division, alleging securities fraud. The plaintiff's attorney was quoted as saying they had credible evidence that Harrington Global knowingly violated federal securities law. The evidence, I knew, was all there. Every warning I'd given, every risk assessment I'd filed, every email where I'd explicitly stated that their strategy was illegal, it was all discoverable now. And Ryan wouldn't even know where to look for it. My laptop pinged with a news alert. Harrington Global stock down 12% in after-hours trading. I poured myself a glass of wine, a good bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion, and stood at my apartment window, looking out at the city, somewhere out there, in that gleaming tower. Ethan was learning what I'd tried to tell him, that the absence of visible protection doesn't mean the danger isn't real. It just means no one's standing between you and the cliff. Another text came through, this one from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Weston, this is Ryan Cole. I need your help. Please, just tell me what to do about the Morrison situation. I'll pay you as a consultant. Whatever you want. I took a sip of wine, savored it, then deleted the message without responding. They wanted to move fast and break things. They just never considered they might be the things that broke. The email came at 2:47 a.m., marked urgent with 3 red exclamation points, a desperation I could feel through the screen. Clara, this is Michael Chen from Whitfield & Associates. I know it's late, but I've just reviewed the Harrington Global situation. There's a massive exposure here that nobody seems to be addressing. I'm ethically obligated to inform someone who can prevent a catastrophe. Please call me immediately. Michael wasn't just any lawyer. He was the senior partner at the firm Harrington Global had kept on retainer for 2 decades. The one who'd helped me navigate the worst crises. More importantly, he was one of the few people who understood the full scope of what I'd been protecting them from. I called him back. Clara, thank God, he said without preamble. The Morrison acquisition documents. Ryan Cole signed off on proceeding with due diligence despite your warnings. But that's not the worst part. He's deleted your risk assessments from the system, thinking it would remove liability. He destroyed documentation? I couldn't hide my surprise. Even I hadn't expected that level of stupidity. He thought he was being clever. Except everything was backed up on our servers as part of the advisory record. Clara, the Justice Department is going to see this as consciousness of guilt. This moves it from civil liability to potential criminal obstruction. I sat down slowly. Michael, I'm not their lawyer anymore. I know, but you need to understand, if this goes to trial, you'll be subpoenaed. Your documentation is the only thing that could prove Harrington Global had legitimate legal counsel advising against these actions. Without your testimony, they're finished. Then they're finished. The silence stretched between us. Clara, I understand you're angry. I'm not angry, Michael. I'm liberated. For 15 years, I've been their guardian angel, and they threw me out for being too careful. Let them face the consequences. The consequences could include criminal charges. Ethan Harrington could go to prison. I thought about that, really considered it. He was warned. Multiple times. On the record. Michael sighed. There's something else. Ryan called me an hour ago. He wanted to hire us to fix this. But he also asked something strange, whether they could sue you for not preventing this before you left. I actually laughed. Sue me for not preventing disasters after they fired me? He seems to think you had an obligation to set up better safeguards, to train him properly before leaving. I had 2 hours between being fired and being escorted out. I know, I told him it was legally baseless and ethically repugnant. But Clara, it shows how desperate they are. They're looking for someone to blame, and you're the obvious target. I stood up, walked to my kitchen, and poured myself a cup of tea. The familiar ritual calmed me. Let them try. I have every email, every memo, every warning I ever issued, including the one I sent to the board 2 days before Ethan fired me, outlining the specific risks of removing experienced legal oversight. You sent a memo to the board? CC'd to all senior shareholders. Subject line, critical risk assessment, urgent review required. Ethan intercepted it. Of course, but it's in the system, time-stamped, authenticated. Michael whistled low. You knew this would happen. I knew Ethan would remove anyone who challenged him. I also knew Ryan Cole wasn't qualified to manage a law school study group, let alone a corporate legal department. The math was simple. So you protected yourself. I documented the truth. If that protects me, that's just a bonus. My phone buzzed with another call. James Harrington again. I let it ring. Clara, Michael said carefully, if you came back, even as a consultant, you could minimize the damage. The board would probably pay you whatever you asked. The damage is already done. Michael, the Singapore contract is signed with that arbitration clause. The Morrison acquisition proceeded despite DOJ warnings. The cryptocurrency division is operating outside securities law. The European data protection violations are about to trigger an investigation, and Ryan destroyed evidence. There's no minimizing this. There's only documenting who's responsible. Which isn't you. No. I agreed. It's not. You could still help them, he said quietly. Despite everything. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed late, all the holidays I'd missed, all the times I'd saved them from themselves without recognition or thanks. I thought about Ethan's dismissive smile when he called me redundant. Michael, do you know what I learned in 15 years of corporate law? Sometimes the best lesson you can teach someone is to let them learn from their mistakes. Even if it destroys them? Especially then, how else will they understand the value of what they lost? I heard him typing, probably taking notes. If they call you directly, offer you anything to come back? They already have. And they will again. But my answer won't change. You're really going to let them burn? I took a sip of my tea, perfectly steeped, exactly the way I liked it. I'm not letting them do anything, Michael. I'm just choosing not to be their firefighter anymore. There's a difference. A semantic one. A legal one, I corrected. As you well know. He chuckled despite himself. You always were the smartest person in the room. No, I said, thinking of Ethan's supreme confidence, his absolute certainty that he knew better. Just the most careful. Turns out, that matters more than they thought. The class action lawsuit hit like a tsunami on a calm Tuesday morning. Not a wave, not a storm. A wall of water that rewrote the landscape. I was having breakfast at my favorite cafe when my phone exploded with notifications. The lawsuit had been filed at 9 a.m. sharp, and by 9:15, every financial news outlet was running it as their lead story. The plaintiffs weren't just individual investors. 3 pension funds had joined, representing nearly 200,000 members. The alleged damages? $847 million. The best part was the lawsuit's opening statement, which I read on my phone while trying not to smile. Defendants knowingly and willfully engaged in securities fraud, despite repeated warnings from their own legal compliance department, which they subsequently eliminated to avoid further oversight. My elimination was now evidence of malicious intent. By noon, Harrington Global's stock had dropped 23%. Trading was halted twice. The SEC announced they were opening a formal investigation. And somewhere in that gleaming tower, Ethan was learning that when you remove the brakes, the crash becomes inevitable. The Bloomberg alert came at 2 p.m. Harrington Global Emergency Board meeting called. CEO James Harrington cuts Europe trip short. Then the Reuters update. Sources, Harrington Global senior management in crisis talks with legal team. What legal team? They'd gutted the department after I left, keeping only junior associates who wouldn't challenge Ryan. Angela had already texted me that morning. She'd submitted her resignation, along with 4 others. At 3:47 p.m., CNBC ran a segment that made me set down my coffee. A panel of legal experts was discussing the case, and one of them, Professor Diana Walsh from Yale Law School, said something that crystallized everything. What we're seeing here is a textbook case of corporate hubris. Based on the filing, Harrington Global had one of the most robust compliance departments in the industry, led by someone named Clara Weston. They disbanded it 5 weeks ago. 5 weeks later, they're facing near-billion-dollar litigation. This isn't coincidence, it's causation. The other panelists nodded. The timing is damaging. It suggests they knew about the violations and removed the person who would object. Exactly. And if this Weston person documented her warnings, which any competent legal executive would, then Harrington Global isn't just facing civil penalties. We're talking potential criminal charges. My phone rang. Unknown number. But I recognized the area code, Harrington Global's executive floor. Clara. The voice was hoarse, desperate. It was James Harrington himself. He'd finally gotten through by using a different line. Mr. Harrington. Please, James. After 15 years, I think we can... He stopped, composed himself. Clara, we need you. The company needs you. The company needed me 5 weeks ago. Your son disagreed. Ethan made a mistake. Several mistakes. The board understands that now. Understanding and consequences aren't the same thing. What will it take? His voice cracked slightly. Name your price, any position you want, double your previous salary, triple it, just come back and help us navigate this. I stood up from the cafe table, walked to the window overlooking the financial district. James, do you know why I never wanted the chief legal officer title, even when you offered it 3 years ago? You said you preferred being hands-on rather than administrative. Partly true, but the real reason? I knew someday, someone like Ethan would come along, someone who confused caution with cowardice, who thought experience was expendable. And when that happened, I wanted to be able to walk away clean. Clara, please. Your son called me redundant. Ryan Cole deleted my risk assessments thinking it would hide liability. Your new management team ignored 17 documented warnings about the cryptocurrency division alone. And now you want me to save you? The company will collapse. Thousands of jobs. Jobs you put at risk when you let Ethan fire me for doing mine. The silence stretched between us. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. The board is meeting tonight. There's talk of removing Ethan from his position. Too little, too late. If he's gone, if we restructure, if we give you complete autonomy. James, you're asking me to stop a bullet that's already been fired. The lawsuit is filed. The SEC is investigating. The damage is done. You could minimize it. You always found a way before. Before, I had 15 years of infrastructure, a trained team, and the authority to act. Now you have Ryan Cole with a template from the internet and a deleted hard drive that's going to look like obstruction of justice. Then we're finished? I watched the sun setting over the city, painting the glass towers in shades of gold and amber. You're facing consequences. Whether that finishes you depends on decisions that should have been made 5 weeks ago. Clara. Goodbye, James. I hung up and turned off my phone. The cafe was nearly empty now, just me and the barista cleaning the espresso machine. On the television above the bar, a financial analyst was explaining how Harrington Global's collapse could trigger a domino effect across the sector. The empire wasn't just cracking, it was crumbling. And for the first time in 15 years, it wasn't my problem to solve. The call came at 11 p.m. on a Sunday. I'd been expecting it for 3 days, ever since the news broke that the SEC had escalated their investigation to criminal charges. Ethan Harrington's name appeared on my screen. And for a moment, I considered letting it ring. But curiosity won. Clara. His voice was different. Gone was the smooth confidence, the dismissive authority. This was raw desperation. Ethan, I need your help. The words came out strangled, like they were physically painful to say. Please, I know I have no right to ask, but I'm begging you. You're facing criminal charges. Obstruction of justice, securities fraud, wire fraud. He laughed bitterly. My lawyer says I could get 15 years. 15 years. Clara, I have a daughter. She's 3. I knew about his daughter. I'd seen her picture on his desk during those early days when he was plotting my removal. What exactly do you think I can do? Testify. Tell them that I was acting on advice from legal counsel, that Ryan was your approved successor, that the decisions were legitimate business judgments, not criminal acts. But that would be perjury. Silence. I warned you, Ethan. Every step of the way. I have the emails, the memos, the board presentations. I told you the cryptocurrency division was illegal. I told you the Morrison acquisition was tainted. I documented everything. I know. His voice broke. God, I know. I've read them all now. Every warning you gave, every risk you flagged. You were right about everything. And you fired me for it. I was an idiot, an arrogant, stupid. He stopped, took a shaky breath. My father won't even look at me. The board voted me out unanimously. My wife is talking about divorce, and the FBI seized my assets pending investigation. I stood up from my couch, walked to my home office where I kept a file I'd hoped never to need. Inside were copies of every crucial document from my time at Harrington Global, including one particularly damning email chain where Ethan explicitly instructed department heads to ignore my risk assessments because they were unnecessarily pessimistic. Do you remember what you said when you fired me? I asked quietly. You said my excessive caution was creating a culture of fear instead of innovation. I remember. You were half right. I was creating a culture of fear of consequences, fear of breaking the law, fear of destroying people's lives and livelihoods. That fear kept you safe for 15 years. Clara, please. I'll do anything. I'll publicly apologize. I'll tell everyone how wrong I was. I'll make sure the entire industry knows what you prevented, what you protected us from. Just help me stay out of prison. I thought about all the times I'd worked through weekends to prevent disasters he never knew existed. The threats I'd neutralized, the lawsuits I'd prevented, the regulatory violations I'd caught before they became criminal charges. All dismissed as excessive caution. There is one thing you could do, I said finally. Anything. Name it. Tell the truth. What? Go to the prosecutors. Tell them everything. How you ignored legal advice. How you instructed Ryan to delete documentation. How you knew the risks and proceeded anyway because you thought regulations didn't apply to you. Take responsibility. That's not helping me. That's ensuring I go to prison. No, Ethan. That's ensuring you go to prison for 5 years instead of 15. It's called cooperation, and it's the only card you have left to play. You want me to destroy myself? You already did that. I'm telling you how to minimize the damage. Isn't that what you wanted? My expertise in damage control. I could hear him breathing heavily, the weight of his situation crushing down. You know what the ironic part is? He said quietly. If I'd just listened to you, none of this would have happened. The company would be fine. I'd still have my position, my family, everything. Yes. You must hate me. I considered that. No, Ethan, I don't hate you. Hate requires emotional investment. You're just another executive who thought he was smarter than the system. I've seen dozens like you. The only difference is, I was usually there to save them from themselves. But not me. No, not you. Because I fired you. Because you didn't just fire me. You dismantled everything I built. You didn't just ignore my warnings. You deleted them. You didn't just make mistakes. You made them with contempt for anyone who tried to prevent them. He was crying now. I could hear it in his breathing. My daughter, he whispered. She won't even remember me when I get out. She'll remember that her father finally took responsibility for his actions. That's more than most can say. Is that supposed to comfort me? No, it's supposed to be the truth, something you should have valued 5 weeks ago. I heard papers rustling on his end. The prosecutor wants to meet tomorrow. If I cooperate fully, testify against Ryan and the others who knew, then you might see your daughter graduate high school. Clara, I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. I know, I said. Everyone is, once the consequences arrive. I hung up and set my phone aside. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, indifferent to the drama playing out in boardrooms and courtrooms across town. Tomorrow, Ethan would likely take the deal. Ryan would be arrested. James Harrington would watch his legacy crumble. And I would start my new position as Chief Legal Officer at Brennan Corp., Harrington Global's biggest competitor, who'd learned what happened when you dismissed experience as excess. The irony wasn't lost on me. Or them, I'm sure. The Wall Street Journal article appeared 6 months later, on a Wednesday morning that felt like any other. The headline read, "The Collapse of Harrington Global, a Case Study in Corporate Hubris." But it was the subheading that made me pause over my morning coffee. How one executive's dismissal triggered a $2.3 billion downfall. I was sitting in my favorite cafe, the same one where I'd watched their empire crumble, when Angela, my former protégé, slid into the seat across from me. "Did you see?" she asked, gesturing to my phone. I saw. Ethan got 7 years. Ryan got 12 for the obstruction. James Harrington had to sell his estate in the Hamptons. I know. She studied me carefully. Any regrets? I took a sip of my cappuccino. Perfect foam art still intact. About what? Not saving them? About all of it. 15 years of your life, gone. Not gone, I corrected. Invested. And I finally got my return. The article continued with details I already knew. Harrington Global had been broken up and sold in pieces. The cryptocurrency division was dissolved. The Morrison acquisition never happened. 3,000 employees lost their jobs. Though most landed elsewhere quickly, a disaster tends to scatter talent to competitors who know value when they see it. The board tried to sue Ethan personally, Angela said. Claims he destroyed shareholder value through gross negligence. He did. They wanted you to testify. I declined. Why? You could have destroyed him completely. I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd had when thinking about Harrington Global. He destroyed himself completely. I didn't need to add anything. My phone buzzed. A text from James Harrington. The journal article doesn't do justice to what you prevented for all those years. I've written a letter to the editor. You deserved better from us. From me. From my son. I'm sorry. I deleted it without responding. Angela leaned back, shaking her head. You know what the craziest part is? Brennan Corp's stock is up 400% since you joined. They're calling you the guardian angel of compliance in the industry newsletters. They just call me Clara. And they listen to you? Every word. Amazing what happens when people value experience over ego. She pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. Speaking of which, I have 3 offers. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and... She grinned. Brennan Corp. Guess which one I'm taking? The one where your expertise will be valued. Exactly. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the morning rush of financial district workers hurrying past. Somewhere among them was probably the next Ethan Harrington, another young executive who thought rules were suggestions and experience was expendable. Do you ever wonder, Angela asked, what would have happened if Ethan had just listened, if he'd kept you on? Harrington Global would still exist. He'd still be executive vice president. Ryan would be managing restaurants. And I'd still be the invisible shield nobody appreciated. So in a way, he did you a favor. I laughed, surprising myself with the sound. I suppose he did, though I doubt that's how he sees it from federal prison. My phone lit up with a LinkedIn notification. Ethan Harrington has viewed your profile. No message, no connection request. Just a view. The digital equivalent of standing outside in the rain, looking through a window at the warm life you once had. I finished my coffee and stood to leave. Angela rose with me. You know what you did, don't you? She asked as we reached the door. You didn't just let them fail. You showed the entire industry what happens when you disrespect expertise. Every CEO in the city knows your story now. Every board thinks twice before dismissing their legal counsel. Every Ethan Harrington wannabe remembers what happened to the original. I didn't do anything, I said, stepping into the morning sun. I just stopped protecting them. The rest was gravity. And revenge? I thought about that as we parted ways. Was it revenge? I hadn't actively destroyed them. I'd simply refused to save them. I'd watched from a safe distance as every warning I'd given came to pass. Every risk I'd flagged became reality. Every disaster I'd predicted finally arrived. That evening, I stood in my new office at Brennan Corp, corner suite, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view that stretched to the horizon. On my desk was a framed photo from my first day here, the entire legal team toasting my arrival. In the corner, barely visible, was a newspaper clipping about Harrington Global's collapse. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. My assistant knocked. Ms. Weston? The CEO wants to know if you're free for the quarterly risk assessment review. Tell him I'll be right there. He also said to tell you, quote, "Thank God you're here." I smiled. Tell him I'm not going anywhere. As I gathered my files, I glanced one last time at the city sprawling below. Somewhere out there, Ethan was learning to live with his choices. Ryan was starting his sentence. James Harrington was rebuilding what was left of his reputation. And me? I was doing what I'd always done, protecting a company from itself. Only now, they knew the value of what they had. I didn't need revenge. I just needed them to learn. And sometimes, the best teacher is consequence itself. I didn't need to watch them burn. I just needed to be free. And I was. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate karma and standing your ground, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Claire's position? Let me know in the comments.